My husband divorced me in the hospital because he was disgusted by my disfigured face from the accident. But now the cheater is back on his knees when he discovers my $2 million settlement. About a month ago, my life changed completely in the blink of an eye. I had just finished my shift and was on my way home. As I approached an intersection, nothing out of the ordinary, just waiting like everyone else, a truck crashed into the back of my car. The impact was so severe that I suffered several injuries. Later, I learned the driver had been drinking. I was drunk. And because of someone who can't stop drinking while driving, my life was ruined. To say the crash was serious doesn't even come close to describing it. I ended up with broken ribs, a shattered shoulder, and both legs fractured. The pain was unbearable. And while it wasn't the most painful part, what haunts me the most is what happened right after the accident. My car caught fire. Half my face was burned in the fire, and parts of my body too. I don't think I'll ever forget that smell of burnt skin, which was my own skin. And I only survived because someone was able to get me out of the car quickly. Cars that saw the accident and rescued me in time. I was in so much pain from everything, but they had to get me out of there because the car was on fire, and there was no way to put it out. It was the worst pain I'd ever felt in my life, but they saved my life. I remember feeling like I was on the brink of life and death. When I finally got to the hospital, I could barely stay conscious from the pain. I was drifting in and out of consciousness, the pain clouding everything. I could hear voices, which I think were the nurses and doctors treating me. That's all I remember. Later, when I came to, I didn't know where I was at first. I was so disoriented. My body hurt like I'd been beaten, and I was wrapped in bandages from head to toe. I could barely move, couldn't even turn my head. Then a nurse informed me that they had contacted my husband and that he was on his way. For context, at the time of the accident, my husband was out of town on a work trip, so I assume it took him a while to reach me. When I woke up again, my husband was right next to me. But strangely, he wasn't even looking at me. He was on his phone. I didn't have the strength to say anything, so I waved my hand a little, trying to get his attention. Eventually, he realized I was awake. He told me he'd been informed of what had happened, and that he'd received the call about the accident during a very important meeting with a client. He then seemed disappointed at having to leave that meeting to come see me at the hospital. I don't even know how to explain what I felt. I'd been through hell, I was close to death, and all he could focus on was his phone and his client. He didn't look sad. He didn't seem worried or even upset, as you'd expect someone to be when they see the person they love lying in a hospital bed, considering the severity of their injuries. Instead, he talked about how difficult it had been to find a red-eye flight, and the problems he'd have having to leave in the middle of his work trip. He didn't say this as if he was blaming me, but rather as if he wanted to talk to me about something, to distract me, although it sounded like he was blaming me. I mustered up enough strength to whisper to him that I was in a lot of pain. I was scared, more scared than I'd ever been, and all I wanted was some comfort. So I asked him how bad I looked, hoping maybe he'd soften his tone or say something comforting, anything, but he just shrugged. He said, "Yeah, you look pretty bad. This is going to take a long time to recover from." Then he gestured vaguely around my body. And if that weren't enough, he raised his finger and pointed at my face. He looked at me straight and said, "Have you talked to the doctor about it? Your face looks really bad." He didn't need to sugarcoat things. He didn't expect me to pretend everything was fine, but he did expect a little humanity, a little love. For the next few days, I was completely dependent on the nurses and doctors, and I must say they were very kind. They showed more warmth and compassion than I could have imagined. They checked on me constantly, spoke to me gently, cleaned my wounds, adjusted my pillows, and held my hand when I was scared. Every person who came into my room said the same thing over and over again. "It's a miracle you're alive." And I guess, in a way, it was, looking back, considering the condition I was in, and how close I came to not surviving. Maybe it was a miracle, but at the time, I didn't feel that way. I didn't feel lucky. I felt pretty bad, to be honest. My husband wasn't around much during those first few days. In fact, he disappeared after his initial visit. I didn't even have the strength to ask where he'd gone. I was too busy trying to breathe because he'd burned my airways. Then came the day they were finally going to remove the bandages from my face. I was terrified. I knew I had burns, I knew they were serious, but a part of me kept holding on to the hope that it wouldn't be that bad. Maybe it wouldn't be as bad as I feared. I wanted to be optimistic. My husband deigned to come by for that moment, sitting silently in the corner. As the doctor slowly began to remove the layers of gauze from my face, I watched him. I watched his expression. And when all the bandages were removed from my face, I watched him recoil in disgust. Trying to remain calm, I asked the medical staff if I could have a mirror. I wanted to see my face for myself. And no, there was no miracle in that regard. I looked terrible, I have to admit. There were huge scars across my forehead and cheeks. My skin looked red and burned. I couldn't even look at myself for more than a few seconds before I started crying and pushed the mirror away. The doctor and nurse left silently, giving me space to process it. I turned to look at my husband, and the first thing out of his mouth when the hospital staff left was, "Those scars make you look incredibly ugly." I already knew that. I didn't need to hear from him how bad I looked. I could already see it. I needed comfort. I needed reassurance. I needed someone to tell me, "You're still you. I'm still here." But instead, he was just pulling me down further. That entire day, my husband couldn't even look me in the eye. He kept averting his gaze, avoiding me as if I were too difficult to look at, and he kept telling me that I needed to get plastic surgery as quickly as possible. However, since I'd already had so many surgeries and was on a lot of medication, the doctors made it clear that I needed to recover first. I needed rest, stability, and time. My husband and I were told that cosmetic procedures were the last thing I should worry about at that time. Then, the week I was supposed to be discharged, my husband visited me in the hospital, looking gloomy. I hadn't seen him since the day they took off my bandages, and he called me ugly. Not a call, not a text, nothing. I figured maybe he'd gotten overwhelmed, maybe he needed time. Still, a part of me hoped he'd be there to help me pack, to take me home, at least to try to be there. But the moment I saw his face, I knew something was wrong. He was acting distant, so I asked him what was wrong. He then confessed that he had moved out of our house. I stared at him, stunned, as he continued to say that he had thought about it a lot and wanted us to separate. I just stared at him. For a second, I didn't even understand what he was saying. I was still sitting in a hospital bed, barely able to walk, covered in stitches and scars, and he was telling me he'd already packed up and left. I couldn't believe this man was leaving me, and he was doing it right in the middle of the hospital where I'd spent weeks recovering. I asked him if he was serious, because if it was a joke, it was the worst possible time to make one. But he simply looked me in the eye and said, in a very matter-of-fact tone, that he couldn't continue living with me when I had a face like that. He meant it. He said he'd be traumatized living with me for the rest of his life, that he hadn't signed up for this, and it was too much for him. But we were married, and he'd said yes in front of everyone that he'd be there for me through my illness. I told him that if that's what he thought, then I wouldn't stop him. I wouldn't want to spend the rest of my life with someone who's just now showing me what they're like, and that I hadn't signed up for this either. He told me he was fine with it and appreciated that I wasn't begging him to stay, that this made things easier for both of us, and that it was good that we were both on the same page. My own husband was leaving me because of something he couldn't control, something that happened to me in an accident, something that could have happened to anyone. And here he was, making all of this about his own discomfort, his own fear, and not about what I needed, what I had always needed from him. He also informed me that I would have to find my own way back home, because he wasn't going to take me, and was only there to break the news. And after that, he just turned around and walked out of the room, leaving me alone in that hospital. I had no choice but to call a friend for help. She and her husband came to my rescue. They both couldn't believe my husband had decided to leave me at such a horrible time in my life. They drove to the hospital and helped me carry all my things. They took me back home, and I am so grateful for their support. It's been more than 3 months since that day. I'm still recovering from my husband's abandonment. He hasn't contacted me and won't even answer my calls. The only time he contacted me was to tell me he'd filed for divorce and that I'd have to sign the papers soon. Since the accident, I've been trying to focus on recovering. My facial surgery is scheduled for a few weeks. The doctors are optimistic that I'll be fine and that I'll be able to start over. My lawyer has also been working tirelessly on my case. We decided to sue the drunk driver who hit me, who also fled the scene. We also decided to sue the company that employed the driver. It turns out he worked for a large multinational corporation, and we discovered this company had a history of hiring reckless drivers, drivers willing to speed just to meet their deadlines. They clearly put profits above people's safety. And that's something I couldn't let go. They were just as responsible for what happened to me as I was. Recently, my lawyer called me with some incredible news. He told me that after much negotiation, we had reached a quick settlement. The company was willing to pay me $2 million. My jaw nearly dropped. I was completely shocked. I was just hoping for something fair, something that could help me pay for the medical bills, the surgeries, and help me rebuild my life in some way. I didn't expect the compensation to be anywhere near that amount. A part of me has been overwhelmed since I found out about this. I don't think I've ever heard that kind of money associated with my name. This settlement is huge, and it's going to help cover a lot. The surgeries, the therapies, the care I still need while I recover. Now, what's happening is that my husband has found out about the settlement, and it seems like everything has changed. Suddenly, he's telling me he misses me. He's telling me that maybe he was too hasty when he decided to leave me. He wants us to forget about the divorce and get back together, of course, as if the news of my lawsuit wasn't a reason to come back. He thinks that now that I have money and my fidelity doesn't bother him, I'll accept him with open arms. Now I'm the one repulsed by his fidelity, but not physically, as a person. At this point, the only thing I want to give him is a divorce. I don't even care what I'll get in it. I just want the $2 million and get on with my life. That's why I've spoken with my lawyer about speeding up the divorce and giving him whatever he's asking for. I mean, it's not like we have a lot of assets, so losing $10,000 or $15,000 isn't going to make a huge difference to my finances from now on. The lawyer said there was no need to rush it, because he's not entitled to this new money. And even if we do rush it, he'll probably want to delay it just to be mean and find a way to get me back with him. He said there's no need to get out of this marriage so quickly, that it's better to wait until I get everything I deserve in the divorce. Do you think I should finalize the divorce as soon as possible anyway, or be mean and take what's coming to me too? Update 1. For people asking if my husband is cheating on me, and maybe that's why he disappeared from my hospital room and was so hasty in leaving me, I guess it makes sense. At first, I didn't even consider that possibility. I never suspected any of it. I never checked his phone or went through his things because I trusted him. Or at least, I thought I did. But now, with everything he's been through, some of the things he did, especially his behavior when I was in the hospital, are making me wonder if maybe there's more to the story than I originally thought. I mean, the way he disappeared from my hospital room, the way he didn't even bother to be by my side when I was at my lowest, it just doesn't make sense. He was so quick to abandon me when I needed him most, so eager to break up without thinking about how much it would hurt me. And then, suddenly, after everything that's happened, and with the compensation agreement, he acts like he wants to be there for me again. Could he have been cheating on me? Was that the reason he was so distant? I don't know for sure, but some part of me can't help but wonder if that's a possibility. I hate to admit it, but it makes sense when I look back on everything he's been through. The way he was always more focused on himself than on us or our life together. It's like, for as long as I remember him, it was always about him. I always expected everything to revolve around him. When we were in a relationship, it was his needs, his desires, his goals that came first. If he was sick or in pain, I would drop everything to be by his side. I took care of him, no questions asked. I was the one there, staying up all night, helping him with whatever he needed. I did everything I could to make sure he was okay, and I always thought that's what a relationship should be like. Mutual care, mutual support. But when it came to me, when I needed him, it was like none of that mattered to him. When I was in the hospital after the accident, he didn't even bother to stay. He couldn't even stay with me for more than a few minutes. He was so cold and distant. I don't even know how to explain it, but I felt like he didn't care. I was going through so much pain, physically and emotionally, and he just walked away. And now he wants back in my life after everything he put me through. After all the times I put him first, after everything I did for him, he wasn't even there when I needed him most. Looking back at all this, I see how selfish that man truly is. It wasn't just the accident. It wasn't just him leaving me in the hospital. It was the fact that, for so long, he was never truly there for me the way I was for him. Throughout our relationship, I was always the one making sacrifices for him, making sure his needs were met, that he was happy. But when it was my turn to need him, when I needed him to be there for me, he wasn't. And that hurts more than anything. I'm only mentioning all this because even if he wasn't being unfaithful, I was still thinking of going through with the divorce. But infidelity could change things in a divorce. And if he was unfaithful, part of me wants to use that to get even. Right now, I'm looking to be meaner. I was happy with my compensation and planned to walk away without any problems. In the end, I'd be leaving with that marriage money, and he'd be eager to get his hands on it. I'm not stupid. I've spoken with asset managers, and it's enough to keep me from having to work for the rest of my life. Imagine a person having a lottery ticket in front of them, lying in a hospital bed, and telling them they don't want it because it looks ugly, and that they want a divorce. It's like breaking it, which is why they're so desperate. But if he was unfaithful, it makes things even worse. And now that I've reduced my pain medication a bit, and I don't feel so numb, I can think clearly. clearly enough to make him pay. I even think it doesn't matter if he cheated, I'm still going to get what's fair from the divorce, even though that money means nothing to me and everything to him. Update 2. So I sat down and talked to my husband, or should I call him my ex now? After everything that's happened, I don't know what to refer to him. He's not the man I thought I was going to marry. I told him straight out that I was done with him, that I was going to sign the divorce papers and split everything 50-50. Up to that point, I hadn't discovered any infidelity. He looked shocked when I told him this, as if he couldn't believe what I was saying. He tried to argue with me, telling me he was wrong, that he'd had time to realize his mistakes, and that he wanted to fix things between us. But I didn't want to go back to him. I didn't need him, and he needed me. I told him it would be impossible for me to ever forgive him for the way he treated me in the hospital, for the cruel things he said to me. No husband should ever speak to his wife that way. No husband should ever abandon her when she's at her most vulnerable, especially after a traumatic accident. She was better off without him, and she didn't know how to forgive him, which is why she wanted a divorce. I already knew I didn't want to forgive him, but I was fishing for evidence of his infidelity. I told him that my friends had been thinking that maybe he had been unfaithful to me, which was why he was so emotionally distant from me. That maybe we were having problems in our marriage, and he was already emotionally detached from us. I told him that if he had confessed to me that he was having an affair, and apologized for it, while promising me he'd do what was necessary to fix it, things would be different. Perhaps I would have thought of forgiving him. But he didn't, and that was what hurt me most about him. I was recording the conversation after consulting with my lawyer. It was a long shot that he confessed something, but I had to try. And at first, he hesitated, saying nothing of the sort had happened. But after about 30 minutes, while I seemed hesitant to forgive him, but made him understand that I had my doubts about the infidelity, he confessed. But even though he confessed, I needed proof. I needed him to give me details. And he did. He even showed me his phone, which I was able to take a few screenshots of without him noticing. When I finally had more than I needed, I thanked him because it would be very useful in the divorce proceedings. That's when he exploded. He went from trying to apologize to being downright nasty. He told me he was glad I cheated on him, because he was a nasty person even before he saw me this horrible. He said he did what any man would do, and I was asking too much. He also threatened me, saying he wasn't going to let me go that easily. He said if I went through with the divorce, he'd come after my $2 million settlement. He said he was entitled to his share. I didn't find it odd or surprised that he wanted to keep my money, but the way he said it was so vile, so greedy, it sickened me. I was furious. I stood up, shaking with rage, and asked him, "What exactly did you mean? Is it yours? Were you in an accident? Did you burn your face? Do you have scars that will take years to heal? Did you break bones and need multiple surgeries?" He was speaking as if I were entitled to something I hadn't earned. I told him that if he really thought he was owed anything, we'd find out in court. He was furious, but I told him to leave. I didn't want to hear another word from him. I didn't want him in my life anymore. He was just a stranger to me. He wasn't even a person to me. He was something that took up space and stole oxygen. At this point, I know people will think I'm mean for doing this, because infidelity alone can mean an extra $5,000 in a divorce. But for me, and for others who were cheated on or treated like me, which unfortunately are not few, it's $5,000 that he won't keep. And yes, I've been receiving messages from men and women whose partners left them because they lost a leg, were disfigured, or had some other permanent damage. Update 3. Hi everyone, it's been almost 8 months since my last update, and I just wanted to share where I'm at now. First of all, I went ahead with the facial surgery, and I'm happy to say my scars are almost completely healed. There will be marks, but I don't look as horrible, and with some makeup, they can be hidden. It feels like a huge weight has been lifted off my shoulders. The pain and insecurity I was dealing with have slowly faded, and while I'm still recovering emotionally, my physical recovery has been one less thing to worry about. As for my ex, well, we're now officially divorced. In the end, he didn't get a single cent from me, no matter how hard he and his lawyers fought for it. If anything, I received from him, and it wasn't pennies. Honestly, I'm proud of how I stood my ground throughout the entire process. During the divorce proceedings, to make sure I wasn't missing out, I even hired a private detective. What I discovered completely shocked me. It turns out my ex had been having multiple affairs throughout our marriage from the very beginning, and the one he confessed to was the least bad of all. The worst part was that, even when I was in the hospital after my accident, he was with one of his mistresses, because he was having multiple affairs at the same time. Anyway, it was a relief to learn the truth about who he really was. That man wasn't worthy enough to be with someone like me. Since the house we owned together was shared property, we sold it, and I took my share. But at least, I didn't have to split my money, which doesn't include compensation, because we're in a state where fault-based divorce is allowed. And since I earned a little more, I ended up with more money than I would have gotten if we simply split it 50-50ths. It was close to $7,000, but it's even more painful for my ex-husband if we put compensation on the table. Anyway, I currently live alone in a small apartment, which is very cozy and perfect for me. It's part of my new lifestyle. I could buy something luxurious and big, but that would require more money, and I'd have to work. However, all the compensation money is now invested and gives me enough to live on, as long as I don't spend too much. I've also taken on a part-time job, something I enjoy doing, just to fill the days and have something to do, while I spend the rest of the day doing things I enjoy. I'm not completely retired or a millionaire, but I can live and do what I want without worrying about money, something my ex-husband would have liked to have. Update 4. I think fate is cruel because it likes to teach lessons. Lessons that sometimes feel personal. Like if you treat someone badly at the supermarket checkout, someone will treat you badly at work a few weeks later. I've always believed that. So, a car accident with a fire would be the closest thing to giving my ex-husband a taste of his own medicine. But it wasn't exactly like that. My husband had gotten his own apartment after the divorce, just like me. And while he was at work, it caught fire. He wasn't inside, nor was he disfigured by the fire, but he wasn't insured. He's never liked insurance and always thought it was a scam. So there you have it, a burned out apartment that you'll either have to invest a lot of money in or sell for less than the price you paid. As I say, I believe in these things, even though sometimes they're not so obvious. But it's impossible not to think that the fire and personal misfortune are related to what happened to me. The difference is that I didn't deserve to go through that, and he did. Although it could also be an indirect sign that fate wanted me to stay away from him, and since his sign was traumatic, he knew how to make it up to me. Maybe what I'm thinking is crazy, but I'm trying to make sense of everything that happened, even if there isn't any.